Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 19th of April 2022. My name's Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of Administrators. I'd like to welcome those in the gallery this afternoon and those watching the live stream. We have a number of officer reports to consider this afternoon and some very important reports amongst them. But I'd like to start by introductions, and I firstly introduce my colleague administrator, Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
Our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Patterson, and our directors, Director Business, Customer and Business Transformation, Ms Jen Bednar, and our Acting Director Corporate Services, Mr Bernard Rowan. We're assisted this afternoon by a number of staff, Simon Horsburgh and Jordan Barfoot, our AV technicians, and Nicole Estrada, our Governance Support Officer. And I acknowledge other officers present this afternoon. We do have an apology this afternoon from Mr Cameron Boardman, who's one of our panel administrator members, and I would ask Mr Belmar to note that apology and move it.
Thank you, Chair. I move that apology.
And I second that. All in favour? Carried. I also note that we have apologies from two of our directors this afternoon, Mr James Collins and Colette McMahon. Open the meeting with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I now move to item 2, the confirmation of minutes, confirming the minutes of the council meeting held on the 15th of March. Could I have a mover, please?
Yes, I'll move those minutes.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and I'll second that. All in favour? Carried. Item 3, declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and do not have any conflicts to declare. Do my fellow administrators or any council officers have any conflicts to declare? Thank you. Now move to item 4, public question time, and we have 5 public questions submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's council meeting. The first is from Mr Gary Page, and the subject is local government election sign displays, and I'll read through Mr Page's question. Given A, Badger versus Bayside City Council judgment by the Supreme Court, B, Local Government Casey City Council Act 2020, C, Local Government Act 2020, Section 257, Part 3, D, a future Act of Parliament changing the administration of the City of Casey, E, there are people who intend to be candidates in the next City of Casey elections, F, the date of the next local government election for the City of Casey could be held prior to the fourth Saturday in October 2024 or 2024. When can corflute signs, etc., for people who intend to stand as candidates in the next City of Casey Council elections be displayed on residential, commercial, sporting, council properties or road infrastructure? For example, see current signs in the centre of Webb Street and Princess Highway intersection. Thank you for your question, Mr Page, and the Manager Planning and Building has advised as follows. Notwithstanding any separate permissions required from landowners to display any signs, planning legislation allows signs publicising political events to be displayed for no longer than 14 days after the event is held or for a total of 3 months, whichever is sooner. In addition, the Casey Community Law 2018 regulates the placement of signage on roads and council land and states a person must not, except with a permit display or permit to be displayed, a sign on any road or council land. This means there must be a permit obtained for each sign that is placed on any road or council land. All permit applications are assessed against the community event signage policy. Further information is available on Council's website. And I do add to that, subject to the state government, that the council election will be on October 2024. Second question is also from Mr. Gary Page on local government candidate signs, and the question is as follows. A permit-exempt sign for a candidate for an election can be displayed with a 3-month display limit under the City of Casey planning scheme and with the specific clauses mentioned, and the local government general elections for the City of Casey can be varied. Can a series of different corflute, etc. signs for a candidate be displayed on a property, up to a 3-month limit per sign, until 14 days after the next local government elections for the City of Casey? So we thank you for your enthusiasm with these questions, Mr. Page, and I can advise further on behalf of the Manager Planning and Building that only one sign may be displayed on the land at a time. The scheme does not purport to limit the consecutive display of different signs, provided it is displayed for no longer than 14 days after the event is held, or for a total of 3 months, whichever is sooner. Question number 3 is from Dale Monkton, and the question is about interest on overdue rates. Could you please advise the total amount of interest charged to Casey property owners for overdue 2021-22 rates and the forecast interest to be charged for those who have not yet paid? The Chief Finance Officer has advised for the first 3 months of 2022, there's been a $0.7 million in penalty interest charged on overdue rates. And that was following Council's decision to freeze penalty rates on all rates in arrears between March 2020 and December 2021. Mr. Monkton's asked a further question in question 4, and that's the topic being the refund credit of interest charged on overdue rates. His question is, in light of the last 2 years and the ongoing poor state of the City of Casey mowing maintenance, will the City of Casey agree to refund credit interest charge for those who pay their rates by the 30th of June? Once again, the Council's Chief Finance Officer has advised that Council has frozen penalty interest rates in arrears from March 2020 to December 2021 in light of the COVID-19 disruptions. Individual ratepayers that are experiencing hardship can contact the Council officers to make an arrangement and have consideration for hardship relief, which can include the waiving of penalty interest. Whilst there have been acknowledged challenges with some services, there is no basis to refund penalty interest on rates in arrears beyond the measures already implemented. So thank you, Mr. Monkton, for your questions. Question 5 is from Mr. Rex Flannery, and it's with regard to the Seabeck Drive Dog Park. Mr. Flannery writes, the Seabeck Drive Dog Park is dusty and boring. Is there any way we can have the dog park upgraded with challenges for our dogs, please? I speak with dog owners who would like this park upgraded. Thank you. The Manager's City presentation has advised that the dog park located off Seabeck Drive in Narrewarren South was built in 2019. There are no current planned works at the park. Council officers will, however, review the current condition and usage of the park to determine if there are any immediate works or future upgrades required to improve the park. So thank you everyone this afternoon for your questions. I now move on to item 5, officer reports, and there are 5 officer reports for consideration at the council meeting this afternoon. Item 5.1 is the Corporate Planning Suite of Documents endorsement for public exhibition. And we have a little bit of a different approach this afternoon. Following my introductory comments, I'm going to ask Mr. Bernard Rowan, our Acting Director of Corporate Services, to present the documents. comprehensive as they are, so that the community can hopefully get excited about the community consultation process and provide us with your feedback. So today is really the launch of our corporate suite of documents, the Draft Budget 2022-23 and the Draft Annual Action Plan 22-23 as part of a suite of our key strategic documents. So this is the launch of those this afternoon, which will follow with a community consultation period in accordance with the Local Government Act of 28 days. So these documents set out how Council is going to invest in the city's future while ensuring that we continue to respond to the challenges of COVID-19 disruptions and the significant cost pressures that we face. Our draft budget, nevertheless, for 2022-23 totals $558 million, with $433 million operational budget and $125 million capital works program. Council intends to meet previous commitments not to exceed the rate cap and would like to acknowledge the hardship that many people have faced during the past 24 months during COVID. This year's budget is and will continue to be financially sustainable, and we still have many, many important projects and exciting projects to deliver in the coming year. We continue to work within very tight budget parameters to balance the needs and expectations of the community while ensuring that we work within those financial constraints and challenges, brought about amongst many other factors by the state government mandated landfill levy increases, a 1.75% rate cap, and plus the economic impacts of COVID-19. The Annual Action Plan 22-23 outlines how the City of Casey will work towards achieving its vision and council plan through specific initiatives. Our focus remains on key pillars such as environment, infrastructure, health and wellbeing, managing urban growth and building future-focused infrastructure. And it outlines our plan to develop multiple levels of partnerships to ensure the pandemic has the minimal impact on our delivery of services and infrastructure. We intend to continue to achieve this through good governance, solid decision making, and ensuring that we hear the community's feedback and voice in what we do. So with those introductory comments, I welcome and invite Bernard Rowan, our Acting Director Corporate Services, to introduce the documents to you. Thank you, Mr. Rowan.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel for the opportunity to join you today at this meeting to discuss the draft corporate planning suite of documents. I direct my comments today through you as Chair. If you could please share the slides. As you've mentioned, the draft corporate planning suite of documents comprises the Council Plan, the Council Plan 2021-25, the Annual Action Plan 2022-23, and the Financial Plan, which basically comprises the current year budget, the long-term financial plan, the scheduled fees and charges, and the capital works program. My comments today will largely focus on the Financial Plan, but I'll briefly address the other documents. It's worth noting and emphasising that in 2021, Council endorsed and approved its Council Plan for the period 2021-25. In this second year of that council plan in the upcoming year, we're only proposing minor changes to the wording in one particular strategic objective and updates to indicators that are outlined through the document and summarised in the council paper. The annual plan for 2023 links to the council plan and identifies the specific actions that council is proposing to undertake in the forthcoming financial year. The particular things to draw to your attention are the support for new recreation reserves in Clyde, Cranbourne West and Botanic Ridge, transitioning the service model for the Casey Cardinia Libraries Corporation, supporting the Melbourne City Football Club service community program, and also implementing the Gender Equality and Prevention of Violence Against Women strategy. So they're just some of the features in the action plan. Turning more specifically to the budget, and as you've mentioned, the rate cap is probably the key issue that Council grapples with each year, and the considerations around how we respond to the tight fiscal environment and economic uncertainty has been a key focus of deliberation over the previous months. In January 2022, the state government set the rate cap for the forthcoming financial year at 1.75%, which effectively means that's how much the current year's rates are allowed to grow. It's like a cap on how much revenue growth there can be in the forthcoming financial year. In 2022-23, for the City of Casey, the revenue derived from that additional rate cap is $3.9 million, which equates to $48.2 million over the life of the 10-year financial plan. This revenue is critical to fund growth requirements for service delivery, but also the underpinning needs of our infrastructure and in our growing community. It's also worth noting that the rate cap that was announced by the state government at 1.75% is lower than the levels that we had previously estimated. So in setting the draft 2022-23 budget, officers have had to provide parameters around how we absorb that loss of revenue. But the rate cap is certainly the first issue that we deal with when we look at the budget. The second substantive issue to draw to your attention, and it has a significant impact with our community, is the issue of waste management costs, so the costs of providing those services to the community and how they're recovered through an annual waste charge, which forms part of the rate notice. In 2022-23, there is expected to be a 9.3% or $4.5 million increase on council's waste management costs. So more specifically, in helping to understand why that's such a large increase, these increases are underpinned by high domestic and hard waste garbage collection charges, which are affected by the state government's landfill levy, which is a tax effectively that applies to the management of those areas of waste. Recycling costs are also experiencing an increase in 2022-23, and that's for a combination of factors, including the contamination issues that we have with that type of rubbish, but also the higher processing fees. And finally, green waste costs are also expected to increase due to higher processing fees. Taken together, these are the issues that we're dealing with in the 2022-23 year, which are significant contractual commitments for council to manage. But beyond that year, there are also future waste management costs coming forward through future changes to the Victorian government curbside reforms. These include dedicated glass recycling services from 2027 and bin lid standardisation, which is being progressively introduced over the future. As officers and as council, there's a continued role for us to advocate to the state government for a fairer distribution of landfill levy proceeds that ensures that the revenue that's collected by that levy is invested in important environmental initiatives for the community. We also are working with the state government to prepare for the future curbside reforms to ensure that we appropriately balance the environmental outcomes from those initiatives with the issues of how we manage the impact of those costs. Here's a brief snapshot. So there is more detail, but this is a brief snapshot of the comprehensive income statement, which is the main sort of financial statement in the budget. And as you've mentioned, there's a $433 million operating budget proposed for 2022-23, which represents a 1.9% growth on the levels for 2021-22. So from an accounting perspective, that's sort of a sustainable level of growth. There's explanatory notes explaining the issues around that, but effectively the main issues are linked to those environmental waste charges and contractual commitments. The other key item in the budget to focus on is the Capital Works program. As you've mentioned, the 2022-23 budget includes a program of $125 million. It's worth emphasising too that this Capital Works program is in addition to the program of works already being delivered by council. So where there are 2021-22 approved projects that aren't finished in 2021-22 but carry forward into the following year, those projects need to be delivered in combination with the $125 million program that's being proposed. So by any standard, this is a large Capital Works program. The other important context here is that this is a high inflation environment, which means that the program has to keep up with the rising costs of services and prices. It's important to note that a key focus from officers through the design of this program has been on the deliverability and the phasing of works to ensure that the program can be delivered. From my perspective, one of the pleasing aspects of the program is that $80 million of this $125 million is directed towards renewal and upgrade, which signifies our commitment to sort of improving the condition of the assets that council is currently managing. I think I'll hand back to you in a moment to talk about some of the projects more specifically, but on the screen there are a few examples drawn out, but the key projects can include around a theme of playground renewal, works on council reserves, community and family facilities, and critical roadworks. So there's a broad balance between new projects and in-flight projects. And finally, the last sort of substantive piece to draw to the council's attention is around financing. So in the 2000 and... I'm just having trouble with the... Can you just pass forward? In the 2021-22 budget, there was a commitment from Council to endorse the principles by which we would be borrowing funds to support our capital works program. In the interim period, there's been a change of policy setting from the state government where the Treasury Corporation of Victoria, which is effectively the state's bank, is now guaranteeing and making available to councils across the state access to borrowings. And so what we've done as a set of officers is work together to identify the parts of the capital works program that best meet our capital works needs, but also can be most appropriately financed through borrowings. So effectively, there's a proposal in the budget to borrow $21 million, which is within a low-risk indebtedness level, but it's effectively a way of leveraging Council's balance sheet to make sure that we can continue to invest in the infrastructure that the community needs. My closing comment is really just about the process that we're commending today and going forward over the coming weeks. What we're proposing is to endorse these draft documents for community consideration between the period of the 20th of April to the 17th of May, and then we're proposing a council meeting on the 31st of May where the community's comments can be considered. But on behalf of the hundreds of officers that have contributed to this material, I just would like to commend this to Council for your endorsement. It's been a lot of work, but there's a substantial piece of corporate planning material here that can guide activity for 2022-23.
Thank you, Mr. Rowan. Thank you for that comprehensive overview of the officer recommendation. And you've noted the dates. We'll reiterate those once again at the end. So I now move to seeking a mover for item 5.1, corporate planning suite of documents.
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And I'll second the motion. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll make some brief comments taking into account the comprehensive explanation and a review of the budget papers that Mr. Bernard Rowan has undertaken. I'd like to thank him and the staff of Council for all the work they've done. This is the third budget in which I've had the pleasure of being involved as an administrator, and I reflect on the fact that on each occasion I am always impressed by the careful work that is done by officers and the way in which they answer and deal with any questions that are put to them with respect to any concerns that I might have or my fellow administrators might have. An issue that we address every year is the question of the rate cap. Is it appropriate that we adopt it? Is it appropriate that we consider other options? And I am satisfied and think it is appropriate that the rate cap be applied. And I understand the financial reasons why it is done and the financial reasons why not adopting it won't just affect us next year, but will have a deleterious impact on Council's finances for many years in the future. And so for those reasons, I am confident and satisfied that it is appropriate to move in that direction. I've also considered other charges that will be increased, and I understand the reasons for why those are occurring, and in particular I note the increase to waste management costs. We are living at a time where waste management is creating significant challenges, not just for local government, but for state and federal governments. We as councils are at the coalface on these issues, and I am absolutely satisfied that as a council we are doing everything possible to ensure that these costs are managed and maintained at a level where we are passing on costs and doing it in a way which is financially responsible. I also note that included in the papers is a lengthy list of fees and charges and the way in which Council will continue to charge for its services over the next 12 months. I have considered those documents, and again I am satisfied that it is an appropriate fees and charges are being collected, and I happily note that a number of collection of fees is increasing for the happy reason that we're open for business again and that Council services are collecting appropriate fees for those services. And in particular, I note that our sporting facilities are being used and that facilities such as Yibunjal are again being used by the community, and that appropriate levels of fees are being set for those services. And the last thing, Chair, that I just wanted to comment on is the question of borrowing. And I note that in these papers we are proposing, or it is being put to us by officers that we borrow funds, and I'm absolutely comfortable that it is financially responsible to do so in the circumstances where we can borrow funds in the manner that has been set out in the papers. And I have omitted one last thing, and that is a reflection on the Capital Works program, which Mr Owen has referred to. And I note that we are continuing to provide significant capital works and continuing to invest in our community. And examples of current commitments that we intend to deliver and new infrastructure that we'll be delivering over time highlight such as over $4 million for the Clyde North Family and Community Centre West, over $4 million for the renewal of playgrounds across the municipality, $2 million for the construction of Cranbourne West Sports Reserve in Lockhaven, and we're also investing over $4 million in footpaths and cycleways, over $50 million, or just over $50 million in recreational, leisure and community facilities, over $4.5 million in parks, open space and streetscapes, and I've referred to also other investments we are making in major services, including over $50 million towards waste management services, over $42 million towards child, youth and welfare services, and $19 million towards the road network. In closing, I just want to again thank council officers. Tonight is in part the conclusion of one part of this work. It's the beginning of it being put forward to the community, and the dates for submissions will are there on the screen, and I'm sure will be referred to again in a moment. But I note that this is a process which, although it looks like these documents are being presented, they're being presented tonight for the first time. These are documents that I'm absolutely sure have been worked on for many months, and tonight we are seeing the product of many months of work by hundreds of people. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this budget and commend it to the community and invite the community to be involved in the submission and public exhibition process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'd like to add some comments, and also I've been provided with some notes from our colleague, Mr Boardman, who has asked me to feed in some of his feedback as well, so I'll cover both of those items. I do concur it's hard to have very much left to say after such a comprehensive overview by Mr Rowan in introducing the material for Council's adoption, but also Mr Belmar, your comments, so thank you to both of you for that. I just wanted to outline some of the particular conditions and underline those that I've felt have been important in our consideration of the material that we're considering this afternoon, most particularly the internal and external pressures that we face. I think that the challenges that we've faced through COVID and that the community have faced have been considerable, and I do commend the organisation for the work they've done in continuing to provide services to the community and being responsive throughout this period. But that disruption still remains, and the cost impacts of that disruption is going to impact on our work in the coming year as well. So that is something that's most important to keep in mind. We do have a strong commitment to ensuring value for money for this community, most particularly adopting the rate cap is part of that. And that is, as Mr Rowan has outlined, really the baseline, given that many of the cost impacts on this council's operations are far greater than that 1.75%. So this becomes a balancing act for us, while continuing to our commitment to providing services to the community, but also to renewing and adding infrastructure in this growing community. The opportunity for us to borrow, as Mr Belmar has indicated, has been through the Treasury Corporation of Victoria with some guaranteed rates, and I too support those borrowings. We know that there are many parts of our community that are still recovering from COVID, and we have a commitment to that support, which is also part of our program. With respect to Mr Boardman's comments, he has also noted the particularly changing and constrained financial environment within which Council is working. And he notes that whilst we've attempted to demonstrate prudence and best practice financial management, it's done in an environment where we still want to meet the expectations of the community and provide high levels of service and maintain and improve Council's assets in a feasible and equitable manner in the coming year. And he's noted that the detailed analysis that goes into the development of that financial strategy, which is including a review of the rate cap, inflationary pressures, the industrial environment that we're working in, and the obvious skills and labour shortage, and the requirement to provide new services imposed through a changing regulatory environment, frequently with little additional funding to do so. An example of that is in the waste management area. Mr Boardman also acknowledges the past 2 years have been very difficult for Casey residents, and he comments about the rate cap and the reasons that we need to include that rate cap increase as part of our budget income. He's noted that that's a decision that he's considered with great earnest, and he feels that whilst there may be parts of the community that will be critical about that, he believes that it's an obligation we have to ensure that we continue to provide services and to renew and expand on Council's assets. He wanted to acknowledge the work that's gone into the development of the draft documents, and that he also welcomes the community input and process that we've gone through up until this point in the input that the community have provided with respect to the various programs, services and capital demands. He looks forward to welcoming and hearing public submissions before any final decision. So with those comments and that feedback from Mr Boardman, I'm happy to second this motion, and I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. It's one of the most important decisions of the year, so we look forward to the community's input and feedback. And I'll just remind people that from tomorrow these documents will be on display. It'll be available on Council's website in particular, and that any submissions that are made will be heard at a special council meeting on Tuesday the 31st of May, and then the recommendations from that process will come to Council on the 28th of June. So there's quite a long way yet to go. So once again, thank you everybody for your input. I now move to item 5.2, the transformation strategy. And in moving to that item, I also move that item, and I seek a seconder.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. It's a welcome point in time, the transformation strategy and the recommendation before us this afternoon. It's the final of our domain strategies for adoption, and I think as a suite of documents, it rounds off the work that's been undertaken very nicely. I think the opportunity that we've had to see a high level of integration of Council's strategic work is very impressive. And whilst this particular document is in many ways more internally focused, it does have many outcomes in it that are for community benefit in the way that we do business. It's a transformative piece of work in that it will prepare the organisation for the future. And in saying that, I refer to it's focusing us on the way this organisation does business with the community, our business transaction processes, including digital processes, and our internal capability, particularly focusing also on staff training and development in implementing that change agenda. It's been informed by many of Council's consultative exercises, most notably through Shape Your City, our ongoing community engagement, community feedback, and our performance and feedback from customers through various surveys about council and their experience in transacting with council as an organisation. Staff engagement has also been very high, and I've been advised by our Director of Customer and Business Transformation that the level of staff engagement has been significant, and the level of enthusiasm for improving our work as a service delivery organisation and a level of government has been very welcomed by staff. The strategy aims to really address many of the challenges within this organisation, and in particular including matters such as the mix of services that we provide and our capacity to respond to the changing needs of our community. So that may mean there are some services that we don't continue in and others that we take on. We need to ensure that our organisation is also easier to do business with, whether that's online or face-to-face, to ensure that the information we provide and the systems we use are accessible to all members of our community. And in particular, to keep this organisation up to date with the skills and tools that staff need to ensure they can continue to provide high level and quality services. So it's a future-oriented strategy, and it ensures Casey has the right framework to address the many challenges related to our growth as well as our financial capacity. It's also very transparent in that each year there'll be an action plan which will highlight the specific program and the resources required. So I welcome the work that's been done, the extensive and long-term work that's been done, the intellectual thinking that's gone into the development of this strategy, and I look forward to being part of watching and benefiting from the fruits of the work that is ongoing. With that, I conclude my comments and I invite Mr Belmar to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to second this motion and really note that it is part of our continuing commitment to good governance and also to taking the advice of officers in the opportunities we have for continuing improvement in the way that services are provided. When I consider the documents and the report, I'm more than comfortable, happy even, that here is a council report that says fairly and squarely where we have opportunities to improve the way that the City of Casey deals with and interacts with council and its services. And in particular, I refer to the document which refers to opportunities for improvement, such as those that our municipality experiences, and they're referred to in fairly robust language as situations where there are inconsistent customer experiences, where we have a misaligned service mix, where we have sometimes inefficient and outdated business models. So really this is council taking a hard look at itself and seeing where can we improve, and taking on your comments, Chair, this is a real opportunity to do some very serious thinking about how to improve. I also note the comments that have been forwarded by Mr Boardman, and I also want to share those with the meeting. And he notes the following: that a digital and service transformation can be challenging for many organisations, and Casey is putting a customer-first perspective. It's looking at the issue from what our community ratepayers can expect at every level. He notes also that there are a number of high-level goals and objectives in the strategy, and each will be examined in specific detail to ensure that they result in service level improvement, whilst also complying with value for money principles. And when I was provided with these documents, I also learned some things about Mr Boardman which are important and which make his input doubly important. He's taken a specific interest in this strategy and its implications to Casey after having led and been part, after he has been led and been part of the digital transformation projects including at the Registry Transformation Project for the Australian Domain Name System in 2018 and 19, and in the whole of State Government Digital Services Review and Transformation Strategy in 2013 and 14. So if I can just interpose there, we have the benefit of Mr Boardman's deep knowledge in this particular area of business. Continuing with Mr Boardman's comments, he is therefore giving an undertaking to the Casey community that any investment the organisation makes in this regard will be to ensure that customers ultimately receive a better service from Council, and that any replacement of legacy systems and technology will be made without disruption to current service levels. And finally, he looks forward to providing further updates to the community as appropriate. I'm happy to second this motion, and I look forward to the continual work of the team that is working on the transformation strategy. And I also note the many briefings we've had on this topic, and I know that Council is in good hands with respect to the advice that we're receiving and the work that is being performed by Council officers. And with those comments, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Now move to item 5.3, the Doveton Pool in the Park Master Plan. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And we also note members of our community in the gallery who are particularly interested in this item, so thank you for attending. I invite you to speak, Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I am happy to move the recommendation that appears in the notice paper, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it out just to be clear that this is the recommendation that I am moving. 1. Council proceeds with delivering an outdoor pool and year-round accessible park as per the scope within the report, on the provision that state and federal government commit a combined minimum 50% of the funding. 2. The Council writes to the state and federal government seeking a combined minimum 50% funding commitment. 3. That further works to be undertaken prior to the next season to determine the season length and operating hours. And 4. That the Doveton Pool in the Park Master Plan be finalised and placed on public exhibition prior to being presented back to Council for endorsement. In moving this motion tonight, I am satisfied and happy to report to the community that it is my intention as an administrator, and one I share with my fellow administrators, to make a commitment to the continuation of Doveton Pool. We acknowledge through the work that has been done by Council officers and also through the opportunity that we have had to meet with stakeholders, to meet with the community, to understand the important role that Doveton Pool plays. In the documents that are attached to the Council papers tonight, you will find, as I did, a piece of work that has been prepared by a company called Programmed, Program Facility Management, in which they set out the work that can be done to the pool to ensure that it can be maintained as a facility open at appropriate times as a swimming pool, to be clear, as a swimming pool for the community of Casey. The issue that needs to be fairly addressed and dealt with is that of funding. And in the motion that I am moving, I am encouraging that both the state and federal government come on a journey with us to ensure that the Doveton Pool can continue to operate. The estimated cost that is set out in the papers is a cost of $21.14 million. This is to not build a new pool, this is to work with what's there, to improve it, to bring it up to date, to ensure that it's safe and fit for purpose for many years into the future. What it will also ensure, if the project goes forward, will be that a water park will also be available. And really it'll be a facility which will not only be a pool, but it'll be a pool, a water park and a facility that's available on a year-round basis, not the particular pool itself, but the facility and what's on offer will be available to the community on more than just particular days when it's appropriate to open the pool part of the facility. So I think tonight is a good news story in that we have listened to the community, we've understood where the community would like this project to go, and we are hopeful, I think more than hopeful, that in future we'll be able to encourage and work with other levels of government to ensure that the CASA community is provided with this important outdoor facility, and on that basis I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll add my comments, and I will say this has been a most interesting process that we have gone through. Challenging in many ways, but I think the outcome is an excellent one. One of the features of this site that I was very keen to ensure occurred was to open the site to the broader community, not just a facility that was fenced and closed for most of the year. And I think the work that officers have done, led by Mr James Collins, has been excellent. The participation of community members and interested stakeholders has also been excellent. And I think the open and transparent manner in which this process has been conducted and evolved has been also very good. These are expensive facilities in the community, and we're very aware that people will look at a figure such as 21.14 million and say, well, that's a lot of money for this facility, but it's the nature of these facilities that is costly. And if we're going to invest in it, we need to make sure that the investment is well placed. And I think the cost estimate and the outline of the project in the concept plan provides an opportunity for both participation in a swimming pool, but also, as Mr Belmar's outlined, a broader community facility, including refurbishing the existing building so that it can be accessed on a broader basis. But also it opens up the available land on that site to the community on a whole of year basis. So I do commend and thank the community for their input, led through our officers, James Collins and his team, Joanna, Manager City and Asset Planning. I think the work they've done has been excellent. It's been difficult to do in a short amount of time as well. The important manner of funding this is, however, that Council has made a commitment. We now strongly seek the support of state and federal government, and we have had a commitment from the community that they're going to work strongly with us to lobby and advocate for contributions to that funding, and we look forward to that partnership. Mr Boardman's also provided a number of comments, and I'll just quickly work through a number of those comments that he has made. He's indicated that whilst the previous aquatic strategy adopted by Council passed resolved to effectively close the pool and replace it with a range of other community facilities, the feedback from the community was unmistakable and consistent, that the community wanted the pool retained. The panels acknowledged this and committed to providing $10.5 million to improve the pool environment and provide for new community facilities. Mr Boardman says he's very proud that Council has concluded to this point, and particularly the engagement process that's occurred. And whilst it's significant, the engagement with the state and Commonwealth governments will continue to ensure that those contributions can be made to see the pool as a vital community asset for many years to come. So Mr Boardman calls on our local MPs and requests their assistance and contribution. So with that, I will put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Now move on to item 5.4, which is the Pound Road and Soldiers Road closures. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move this.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I second the motion, and I invite you to speak to it.
Thank you, Chair. This is, in some respects, a procedural motion, as work has been done over many years to ensure that these road closures occur at an appropriate time. The roads that are intended to close are as set out in the recommendation that Council endorses: a Pound Road between Thompson's Road and Patterson's Road, Clyde North, and Soldiers Road north of Grice's Road, Berwick, be formally closed to traffic in 2023 once new alternative roads and intersections are completed. Tonight, or through this motion, it's a culmination of many years of work through work that has been done by councils through adopting in the past precinct structure plans, which require that these roads be closed for the provision of either new facilities or for the provision of new housing estates or further parts of existing residential estates. So in moving this motion, I am confident that these roads are being closed or will be closed at an appropriate time. The motion provides that they will be closed at a time when other work has occurred, so that the minimum interruption will exist as a result of closing these roads. So these roads are not being closed willy-nilly or in any way out of the blue. These roads are being closed because of careful road planning that has occurred over time. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I have nothing to add. I support the recommendation, and I note that Mr Boardman also supports the recommendation. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Our final item this afternoon is item 5.5, advertising and promotional signage on Council's active recreation reserves policy, and I move the recommendation as printed. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And in speaking to this item, I note that it's one of the last of the operational policies that Council has reviewed, and future policies will be reviewed in a more timely manner by the Chief Executive Officer as required. But advertising and promotional signage in Council's active recreation reserves is often controversial, funnily enough. And the review of the policy as it's presented to us this afternoon, I think, strikes a really good balance between ensuring that these facilities are utilised appropriately and are predominantly for the community's purpose. They're not predominantly for advertising. So the policy appropriately utilises signage, or the opportunity for the inclusion of signage that promotes the user clubs and the facilities on these sites, and not broader than that. But it does enable users to advertise and gain some small financial contribution for user clubs through advertising. I note the policy was last updated in 2017, and that future reviews will, of course, now, as I've said, be undertaken by the Chief Executive Officer in response to any notable changes that need to occur. So I do commend officers on the work they've done on this policy. I think it's comprehensive, and it's a very effective user guide as well. It remains that the inclusion of signage will be subject to officer approval, and I think that is appropriate, but the processes will be streamlined for clubs and will ensure that timely approval does occur. So with that, I move the recommendation, and I invite Mr Belmar to speak to it as seconder.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second this motion and note that it is in part continuing the work that we have done as administrators to ensure the continuous improvement of our policies, and where appropriate to ensure that decisions of this type in the longer term are taken out of the hands of Yes, I'm just looking for the appropriate word. To ensure that these decisions can be made in a way that is most streamlined, if I can put it that way. And in this particular policy, we're ensuring that there'll be compliance with both our local government, our local policies, with and also with state policies, and also ensuring that sporting clubs that use active reserves will be able to improve their funding by their continuing involvement with local MPs. I've also received some comments from Mr. Boardman, and I note he's following the following comments that he has made. He acknowledges the work that has been done by some local members of Parliament on this issue, and he notes that he has no objection to members of Parliament in advertising or promoting themselves and their services, and he acknowledges that he did it when he was an MP. And he acknowledges that if it's done on public land, it will need to comply with all relevant planning and other requirements. He also notes that it's not a simple matter of allowing anyone to put up a sign as they want, and that there are processes which will apply to everyone equally. He also trusts that the policy is viewed in the manner in which it was developed to provide clarity around the process and the guidelines for such signage, and to remove any ambiguity which previously existed. And finally, he supports the policy and the recommendation, and trusts that those affected parties will comply with the policy accordingly. And with those comments, I am happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes officer reports this afternoon. Move to item 6, which is consideration of reports of committees, and I note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, petitions. There are no petitions received for the council meeting today. Item 8, urgent business. Once again, there's no items of urgent business for consideration at this council meeting. I do advise we have 2 items in closed council today. The first is item 13.1, which references council business information being information that would prejudice the council's decision in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, and item 13.2, which is with respect to personal information being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs. So now we will be moving into closed council. I declare the open council meeting closed. I thank those who've attended in the gallery this afternoon, and also those who've watched live stream, and thank the officers for their support in the meeting today. So good afternoon and thank you.